Just under 2 weeks ago, an American energy firm called Genie Energy announced it had been granted a license for oil exploration in the Golan Heights. The license was issued by the government of Israel, which gave no details except to confirm media reports of the announcement. Some would argue there is cause for shareholders and the Israeli government to be hush on this matter. The Golan Heights is an occupied territory belonging to Syria, which means Israel's presence here is illegal, and Israel's exploitation of resources here is also illegal.
The people of the Golan, through their history, through their past and present, will not be anything but Arab Syrian.
I don't think there is a long-term thinking right now. It's an economic venture, it's a business venture.
We're going to be in a situation where Israel, as the occupying power, may be extracting Syrian oil, which will be needed for the rehabilitation, the reconstruction of Syria.
The grumble of machinery disrupts nature's ambience on the border between Israel and Syria. Israel is mending a fence through the Golan Heights, part of the vital upkeep of an area it says is crucial to ensuring Syria's bloody civil war doesn't spill into its borders. Israel says the Golan Heights is a land promised to it under a 1940s British mandate. It accuses Britain of reneging on the promise in a secret deal with France over oil. In the 1940s, when the mandate was being executed, the Golan Heights was a thriving apple farming community with hospitals, schools, a bustling town, and churches and mosques that served a multi-faithed Syrian community. In 1967, when war broke out in the Middle East, Israel forcefully took the Golan Heights in a land grab that was to continue into the next 45 years. It displaced a large part of the 400,000-strong indigenous Arab population. 7 years later, in 1974, Israel was to withdraw from one-third of the area, and in doing so destroy the central town of Quneitra, leaving a vast and dangerous minefield behind. Today, Israel controls two-thirds of the Golan Heights, and a UN buffer zone monitors the rest. Do a quick Google image search of the area, and you'll see wide open space, green mountains, snow peaks, waterfalls, and even a ski resort. This is the Israeli-occupied part of Golan, and it's spread across at least the first 5 or 6 pages of search engine results, hiding very well a side far more unpretty and grim. This is the area left behind. Israel destroyed everything that was here. These are photographs I took at the Golan Heights during a visit to Syria in the summer of 2010. They show the remains of what used to be a hospital, evidence of shelling strewn across the walls. The hospital is one of the few buildings that remain somewhat standing. Houses and schools lie flattened in the quiet of a hot Syrian summer. The empty shell of a local church gradually crumbles. Concrete appears to be the last thing to go. And a grey and lonely minaret from Quneitra mosque stands silent. The entire place is in fact chilling and numb, as if frozen in the moment Israel left it in. The Syrian governments of Hafez al-Assad and then his son Bashar both chose to keep the area exactly as it is, to remind the world of the destruction caused by Israeli forces. A United Nations disengagement observer force provides a buffer between the two nations. For my visit, I required a special permit from the Syrian government before I was guided through the area by a UN escort. There were constant reminders to stay on the roads and not venture out behind barbed wire, and we were told not to pick anything up off the ground. Pieces of plastic can turn out to be fatal as the land is scattered with mines. For over 45 years now, Golan, or Golan as the Syrians call it, has been an issue of contention in the Middle East. The Arab Druze community in the Israeli-occupied part still complain of being forced to live under Israel's law. At a protest last month, they loudly rejected the occupation and called Israeli decisions illegal and invalid.
Today, February 14, is the blessed anniversary of the heroic strike by the people of the Arab Syrian Golan against the Zionist enemy, against his decision to annex the Golan, against his decision to impose Israeli citizenship on its residents. The people of the Golan, through their history, through their past and present, will not be anything but Arab Syrian.
With the community here already under strain, this license granted to Genie Energy is only likely to stoke tensions further.
This is one of the anomalies of the Middle East. It's all smokes and mirrors. Not what you see is actually what is there. The Israelis take the view, as long as there is no peace agreement, as long as we are not obliged or compelled to return the territories, we treat the territory as ours.
Genie Energy's website says Israel has awarded its subsidiary, Genie Israel Oil and Gas, an exclusive petroleum license covering nearly 400 square kilometers in the southern part of the Golan Heights. Genie Energy believes the area may contain significant quantities of conventional oil and gas in relatively tight formations. In essence, an exploration license allows a company the exclusive right to explore and drill for oil and gas in a certain area. This is usually referred to as a block. The license is also normally for a specified period of time. If Genie Energy finds oil here, it could then move into the development and later production phases, and for this the company will need to apply for new types of licenses. Chris Doyle is the director at the Centre for Arab and British Understanding, or CABU. He explains to me the illegality of such a move.
Well, Israel is the de facto authority, and it's taken upon itself to grant such a license, although it is in very clear violation of international law. The Hague Convention of 1907 explicitly would rule out the exploitation of a non-renewable resource like oil, and that's very, very clear. And there's precedent as well between Singapore and Japan. So I don't think there's any doubt about this. It's internationally recognized as occupied territory, the Golan Heights. It belongs to Syria. Even though that Israel has annexed that, there was a Security Council resolution that made it quite clear that that was not recognized internationally. So I think the legal basis for this is absolutely clear.
Well, I think, unfortunately, also legality is in the eye of the beholder. And the Israelis would argue, we apply the Israeli law. They anyway call it disputed land and not occupation. So they argue, as long as there is no peace agreement, we administer the place, we are in charge of it, and they even might argue on few occasions we were ready to return the Golan Heights for peace, and still it never happened.
A statement on Genie Energy's website makes no reference to any legal implications. No distinction between Israel and Israeli-occupied lands, and no mention of Syria. Political analyst Yossi Meckelberg says this isn't the first time Israel has attempted to exploit the resources of a land it occupies.
It didn't stop Israel in the Sinai Peninsula when it was occupied between 1967 and 1982 to develop the oil fields in the Sinai. And when a peace agreement was signed with the Egyptian, the oil fields actually returned to Egyptian hands in return for an agreement to supply oil to Israel cheaper than the market price.
That peace treaty was signed in 1979 to normalize relations between Israel and Egypt. In 1980, the two countries exchanged ambassadors. Trade began to develop, and Israel started receiving the promised crude oil from Egypt. Chris Doyle says any oil extracted from the heights must belong to Syria, and that this must be made clear now.
Any oil extracted from the Golan Heights does not belong to Israel, and it should not benefit from it. So if it gets to the point of production and then hands it over to Syria and hasn't benefited from it, fine. But if by the time Israel does make a peace deal with Syria, and let's hope that happens one day, if it's been extracting oil for 10 years, then that oil money belongs to the people of Syria. And I think that should be made very, very clear.
Syria was close to recovering the Golan Heights in 2007, when Israel agreed to surrender the land in return for ending the state of war that currently exists. It was somewhat of a pipe dream. Few believed Israel would dismantle the 32 settlements it had allowed to be established here, or give up a strategic piece of land that lies along one of its main water supplies. The Sea of Galilee provides some 40% of Israel's water needs, and Syria has previously been accused of deliberately trying to cause water shortages in Israel. Sure enough, the idea of return was too good to be true, and it fell into the darkness of Israel's war on Gaza just shortly after.